By the time the widow reached the last ridge above Red Hollow, the sky had gone the color of old iron, and the wind had started its hungry whistle through the sage. She had one child on each side, one boy too proud to admit his legs were failing, one little girl so tired she stumbled every few steps, and behind them rattled a single suitcase tied to a crooked handcart. She should have looked broken, but Clara Belle looked like something harder. A woman who had already lost the worst thing and kept walking anyway. When she saw the ranch house below, lamplight burning warm against the dark, she stopped. Because a cowboy stood on the porch with one shoulder against the post as if he had been waiting on the road all evening. And when she braced for suspicion or refusal, he only pushed the screen door open and said, "You're late for supper." The words struck her stranger than thunder. She had buried her husband 6 weeks ago, sold the last of what debt collectors had not clawed away, and come west on the strength of one old promise she barely believed. Tom Bell had once told her there was a rancher named Eli Mercer who remembered favors long after better men forgot them, but she had not expected kindness to be standing on a porch in plain sight. Sam stepped half in front of her before she could speak. "All sharp elbows and thin courage, we ain't begging," he said, and the cowboy's gray eyes shifted to him without heat. "Good," he replied, "because I ain't offering charity. I'm offering stew before it burns." Then the smell drifted out. Beef, onion, fresh bread, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. And little June made that small wounded sound hungry children make when they are trying to be brave. Clara gripped the suitcase handle until her fingers hurt. "I was told Eli Mercer might have work," she said, and the man gave one slow nod. "You found him?" he answered. Then he looked at the clouds piling black behind her. "Come in before the storm makes up its own mind," and sighed. The place was neater than she expected and lonelier than any home had a right to be. Boots lined by the wall, rifles locked in a corner rack, blankets folded square, and a table already set for 4, though she had seen no one else on the ranch. That detail troubled her more than the food, because it meant either he had known she was coming or he had grown used to preparing for company that never arrived. Eli took the suitcase from her hands and set it by the stove, then crouched in front of June with awkward care. "You favor biscuits or cornbread?" he asked, and June whispered. "Both." For the first time in days, Sam nearly smiled. Clara did not. She stood stiff as fence wire while Eli filled the bowls, watching him with the caution of a woman who had learned that every kindness carries a price tag somewhere. Then he sat and said the one thing she had not prepared for. "Tom Bell pulled me out of a river with a busted shoulder and a fever that should have killed me." The spoon slipped from Clara's fingers and rang against the bowl. "Eli spoke plain, no flourish," he told me, "if chance ever came crooked enough. I was to look after his family." Clara swallowed hard, because Tom had mentioned Eli only twice in all their marriage. Once after whiskey, once after a rainstorm that made him sentimental. She had thought it just one more cowboy promise men make and time erases. "Tom is dead," she said, and something in Eli's face shifted. "I know," he answered. "The letter reached me yesterday. For a while there was only the scrape of spoons and the storm building at the windows." Sam ate as if speed might hide his hunger. June used both hands. Clara forced down enough to keep from shaming herself, and Eli finally spoke of work. Bookkeeping, laundry, tending chickens. Lessons for Sam when weather made school impossible. "No one stays here for free," he said, "not because I'm mean. Because pride lasts longer when it earns its keep." Sam lifted his head at that. Studying him with wary respect, Clara held Eli's gaze. "And what do you get?" she asked. He leaned back in the chair, hat off now. Dark hair rough from weather, a pale scar cutting across one brow. "A quieter conscience," he said, then after a pause. "And maybe less empty rooms. That should have been the beginning of peace. But hard places seldom allow peace to enter without testing its spine." Before Clara could answer, hooves pounded up the drive and men shouted through the rain. Eli's whole expression changed, flat and dangerous. He rose and reached for the rifle rack. Because supper had not made them safe, it had only made them visible. 3 riders waited in the yard under the storm. The one in front was Deputy Wade Harlan, a broad man with a polished badge and a rotten smile. "Evening, Mercer," he called. "Heard a widow came through carrying a dead man's debts and maybe a deed that don't rightly belong to her. Clara stepped into the doorway before Eli could answer for her, rain blowing cold against her face. My husband owed no thief a thing. Wade's grin widened. Then I reckon you won't mind proving what's yours. There it was. The real hunt, not law, not order, but land. Tom had owned 40 scrub acres near Dry Creek, worthless to decent men. Suddenly precious now that railroad men had been sniffing around the county, Clara had kept the deed sewn inside the lining of June's winter coat ever since the funeral. Because widowhood teaches a woman fast that some men can smell weakness farther than wolves smell blood. Wade saw the flicker in her eyes and laughed. There now, I knew it, he said. Eli stepped onto the porch with the rifle low in his hands, rain sliding off his hat brim. What I know, he said quietly. Is you're interrupting supper? One of Wade's men spat into the mud. Another let his hand drift to near his holster. Inside the house, June began to cry, soft at first, then harder. And Sam made a furious sound Clara had only ever heard in wounded animals. Wade's voice turned ugly. Last chance, widow. Hand over the paper and I might leave you enough dignity to ride out by morning. Clara had been afraid so long she was tired of it. She stepped out until she stood beside Eli under the porch light, shoulder to shoulder with a man she had met less than an hour ago and trusted more than half the world. You want the deed, she said, loud enough for the storm to hear. Then go dig up my husband and ask why he left it to me instead of carrying. Wade swung down from his horse, boots splashing hard in the yard, his hand dropping at last to the grip of his revolver. Everything narrowed, Sam shouted. June screamed. Thunder cracked over the roof. And Eli Mercer raised the rifle with the calm of a man whose fear burned colder than other men's rage. You draw in this house, he said, and they bury you wet. The rain hammered the porch rails. Clara could hear only her own pulse and June's crying. Then whatever good sense remained in Wade took hold. He spat into the mud, climbed back to the saddle, and pointed to fingers at Clara. Morning comes early, he said. Law looks cleaner in daylight. Then the riders disappeared into the storm. June trembled for an hour after. Sam pretended he was fine, which fooled nobody. And later in the bunkhouse, Clara stood staring at the little coat hanging by the stove, the deed still hidden in its lining, while Eli remained in the open doorway, too respectful to step inside without asking. You should have told me about the land, he said. Clara let out a tired laugh. You should have told me supper came with gunfire. For the first time, his mouth almost bent into a smile. Then it faded, and in the lantern glow she saw it clearly. The loneliness in him, the sort that had settled deep and learned the house by heart. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Because gratitude alone did not explain the extra plates, the ready bed, the way he had moved when June cried. Eli rested a hand on the frame and looked down at the floorboards. My wife died 3 winters back, he said. Baby with her. After that, the place got so quiet, I started leaving lamps burning in 2 rooms just to lie to myself. The words landed gently and terribly all at once. Grief recognizing grief without asking permission, Clara felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry, she whispered. Eli nodded once. Me too. Before dawn, the storm cleared, and the ranch woke glittering with rain. Clara had barely slept when hoofbeats came again. But it was not Wade who rode in first. It was Judge Talbot with the town clerk, 2 neighboring ranchers, and Wade behind them, looking less certain in daylight than he had in darkness. Eli stepped out to meet them, Clara beside him. The children closed at her skirts, and the judge raised a folded paper. Mrs. Bell, he called. Word came by rail late last night. Your husband filed a duplicate deed and testament in Cheyenne before he died. You are sole owner of the Dry Creek parcel, and Eli Mercer is named guardian of any sale until your children are grown. Wade cursed under his breath. The judge ignored him. Deputy Harlan has also been relieved pending inquiry into attempted coercion and abuse of office. One of the ranchers took Wade's reins before he could protest, and for the first time since Tom's burial, Clara felt something shift inside her. Not happiness yet, but justice clearing its throat. Sam grinned wide as sunrise. June clapped because everyone looked surprised, and she took surprise for safety. And Eli only turned enough to meet Clara's eyes. "Looks like morning did come early," he murmured, later. When the riders were gone, and the valley had turned gold under the clean light after storm, Clara stood on the porch with the deed in her hand while Sam and June chased each other around the trough. The ranch still looked lonely and hard, but it no longer looked impossible. "I can sell the land," she said. "Find rooms in town." Make do somehow. Eli leaned one shoulder against the post beside her. Hat tipped back, face easier now than it had been all night. "You could," he said. Then he let the silence sit just long enough to matter. "Or you could take the east room instead of the bunkhouse. Help me make this place sound less like memory." Clara looked at him properly then. At the cowboy who had opened a door before asking a question. At the man who had met ruin with supper instead of pity. She thought of Tom, of trains, of thunder, of June asleep with biscuit crumbs on her cheek, of Sam standing taller this morning than yesterday. And when she spoke, her voice did not shake. "Only if I earn my place." Eli's smile came slow and rare and warm as the lamplight that had first caught her from the ridge. "Clara," he said, while the children laughed and the cottonwoods whispered in the breeze. "You've already walked all this way. I reckon that counts for one hell of a beginning."